On the morning of August 9, 1969, Los Angeles police received a call claiming a murder had taken place on Cello Drive after housekeeper Winifred Chapman ran screaming to her neighbor's front door. When officers arrived at the scene, they weren't prepared for what they'd find. They entered the gated property with their guns drawn, but all was quiet except for a dog barking behind the guest house. Parked in the driveway was a white two-door sedan with the body of a young man slumped over in the driver's seat. On the grass directly in front of the house lay the body of another young man, and maybe 20 yards from him, under a tree, was the twisted body of a young woman in a bloody nightgown. The scene inside the lavish home on Cello Drive in LA's Benedict Canyon was something straight out of a horror film, showcasing the brutal violence that occurred there just hours before. The officers found 2 more bodies on the floor of the living room, connected by a nylon cord that was placed around their necks. They were the bodies of actress Sharon Tate, wife of fugitive film director Roman Polanski, and her former fiancé, Jay Sebring. The woman under the tree was Abigail Folger, heiress to the Folgers' coffee fortune. Lying on the grass in front of the house was 37-year-old Wojtek Brokowski, a Polish actor who worked with Polanski before they arrived in Hollywood. The young man in the car was Stephen Parent, an 18-year-old college student. Police continued to search the property, and when they entered the guest house at the West End, they were shocked to find someone alive. 19-year-old caretaker William Garrettson sprung from his bed as officers burst through the door. He was arrested and taken in for questioning as the prime suspect in the killings. He told police he had no idea the murders had taken place and slept through the night. After passing a polygraph test, he was released due to lack of evidence. The shocking, seemingly random nature of the murders created a widespread panic throughout LA, dominating the news cycle. And within 24 hours, things would get worse.
A middle-aged couple was found murdered in similar circumstances.
The latest murders were discovered during the night. The bodies of a man and his wife found in their home. Lino LaBianca, a supermarket owner, and his wife had both been stabbed to death, repeated stab wounds. On his body, the word war had been carved in the chest. Then, with blood, the killer had scrawled on a refrigerator door the words, "Death to pigs." Hoods had been placed over the heads of both victims. With daylight, police searched the premises. They found no evidence of robbery, no suggestion of motive. A baffling crime and bizarre. The bizarre circumstances of those 2 murders last night were strikingly similar to the 5 murders at a home in Bel Air a few miles away 2 days before.
Though the murders happened only miles apart and they shared the same brutality and anti-police messages scrawled in blood, police officials shied away from suggesting the crimes were connected. Sergeant Bryce Hauschkin stated, "There's a similarity, but whether it's the same suspect or a copycat, we just don't know." Inspector KJ McCauley took it a step further, telling reporters, "I don't see any connection between this murder and the others. They're too widely removed. I just don't see any connection."
Two separate investigations of the Tate and LaBianca cases led detectives to the conclusion that the crimes in both cases were committed by the same group of people. Today, warrants have been issued for the arrest of 3 individuals in connection with the murders of Sharon Tate, Abigail Folger, Rakowski, Stephen Parent, and Thomas John Sebring. These murders occurred on August the 9th on Cello Drive in West Los Angeles. These persons also were involved in the murder deaths of Rosemary LaBianca and Lino LaBianca, president of Gateway Markets in Hollywood. This homicide took place a day later on August 10th, 1969. It is anticipated that an additional 4 or 5 persons will be named in indictments which will be sought from the Los Angeles County Grand Jury.
Go ride a horse. Go ride a horse. Feelings towards everything. I feel no bad. I know no bad. Open them. I'm not against you. Huh?
Are you bitter?
Bitter? No. No.
I have a question. Are you guilty of any murders? Are you guilty of plotting any murders?
Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, and Charles Manson were indicted for the August murders, sparking a media frenzy that foreshadowed the most shocking trial in U.S. history. Prosecutor Vince Bugliosi told a sordid tale of sex, drugs, rock and roll, racism, and murder. He suggested that Manson was a master manipulator who was able to create a growing stable of almost powerless slaves through mind control techniques that involved sex, violence, and most importantly, LSD. He went as far as to have the jury removed from the courtroom during Manson's hour-long testimony, arguing that Charles would use his hypnotic powers to unfairly influence the jury.
Ride a horse. Feelings towards everything. I feel no bad. I know no bad. Open them. I'm not against you. Huh?
Are you bitter?
Bitter? No.
On November 16, 1970, the prosecution rested its case, and on January 25, 1971, the jury announced its verdicts. All 4 defendants were found guilty on all 27 counts against them.
7 men and 5 women will continue to be locked in a hotel each night until they decide life or death sentences in the penalty phase of the trial, which will begin Thursday and could take several weeks. Los Angeles.
Today, the judge formally passed sentence on Charles Manson and his girls, the death penalty, he said, for 7 senseless murders. He said not only was the sentence appropriate, but almost compelled in this case, so death in the gas chamber, he said.
Linda Kasabian was granted immunity in exchange for her testimony against the family, and Charles Tex Watson was tried separately for his crimes after successfully delaying his extradition from Texas to California for 9 months. In the end, Alba Kasabian were sentenced to death until the Supreme Court of California abolished the death penalty in February 1972, and their sentences were reduced to life in prison. The outcome of the trial wasn't a surprise, but details surrounding it were brought into question years later, and the story told in Vince Bugliosi's #1 true crime bestseller, Helter Skelter, would be exposed as fiction. In 1974, New York Times journalist Seymour Hersh published a story about how the CIA had conducted non-consensual drug experiments and illegal spying operations on U.S. citizens. It was this report that eventually brought MKUltra into public view and led to congressional hearings held by the Church Committee in 1975. A Freedom of Information Act request in 1977 led to the discovery of MKUltra files and another congressional hearing. There were only 20,000 pages discovered, and no one was going to be forthcoming with any information at the hearings, so there's a lot we still don't know. However, what we do know is quite disturbing. Project MKUltra, Subproject 8. Subproject 8 is being set up as a means to continue the present work in the general field of LSD until 11th of September, 1954. This project will include a continuation of a study of the biochemical, neurophysiological, sociological, and clinical psychiatric aspects of LSD, and also a study of LSD antagonists and drugs related to LSD, such as LAE. A detailed proposal is attached. A new drug, LAE, becomes available for us, and we propose to investigate it more thoroughly in the coming year. Its name is lysergic acid ethylamide. This chemical is closely related to LSD. We learned the following. 429 experiments were carried out on 28 normal persons and some psychotics. Normal individuals experienced a schizophrenia-like condition which was characterized by adynomy, indifference, impaired volition, and phenomenon of depersonalization. In schizophrenics, LAE counteracted paranoid hallucinatory excitation. That is to say, the schizophrenics did not lose their paranoid delusions or hallucinations, but became indifferent to them, a phenomenon which appeared to the investigator as similar to the effect of prefrontal lobotomy. Therefore, he considered the effect of LAE as that of a reversible chemical lobotomy.
1,000 more pages of details on CIA secrets from the 40s and the 50s were released today, and they tell of attempts to control human behavior with drugs, discussions of how to commit murder leaving no evidence, such as freezing the victims to death and then thawing them out, and other devices discussed, if not used, back in the Cold War days. Here's Ford Rowan in Washington.
Everyone has his breaking point. That view, stated in a CIA memo, just about sums up the objective of the drug program. The CIA was interested in using drugs, electroshock, hypnosis, and radiation to find the breaking point of people it wanted to interrogate. Previous disclosures have centered on the CIA's experiments with drugs on people who didn't know they were being tested. These new CIA documents show that drugs were actually used in secret operations. This memo shows that 2 Russians suspected of being double agents were drugged and hypnotized. The interrogations were regarded as very successful. Another memo shows that the CIA was interested in a drug that causes loss of speech, loss of memory, and loss of willpower and puts a person in a catatonic stupor. Another CIA memo discusses ways to kill people with chemicals, drugs, x-rays, dry ice, and a pillow, smothering the victim in bed. Some of the CIA officers trained to carry out such tasks developed personality problems. One officer who apparently reached his own breaking point was codenamed Explosive. The CIA memo says Explosive had to be dropped from the program and turned loose. Ford Rowan, NBC News, Washington.
Many researchers now believe that Manson's arrival in San Francisco wasn't an accident, nor was the creation of the Manson family or maybe even the hippie movement itself. After being released from prison in March 1967, Manson's parole officer suggested he go to San Francisco, saying it would be a good place for him because it was filled with good vibes. When he arrived, he called the parole office in Los Angeles and was told that he was in violation of his parole and had to return to LA. This is where Roger Smith enters the story. Smith was Manson's parole officer and arranged for Charles to remain in San Francisco under his authority. He wasn't just a federal parole officer, he was also a drug researcher and part of an experimental federal program designed to study how varying caseloads affected officers. He started with 40 cases and by 1967 was seen as an expert on gangs, collective behavior, violence, and drugs. Only one parolee was left under his supervision, Charles Manson. Smith conducted his drug research at the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, which opened in June 1967, 3 months after Manson's release. The clinic was founded by Dr. David E. Smith, and all the staff members were volunteers who treated hundreds of people every day. It wasn't just a free clinic, it was a place where the summer of love drug culture was promoted. They helped people who had experienced bad psychedelic trips, overdoses, sexually transmitted diseases, and those who just needed someone to talk to. But everything wasn't as groovy as the murals painted on the exam room walls suggested. It was an unauthorized clinic that was targeted by police due to the sheer number of people that were always hanging around. David Smith struggled to pay rent. He needed more funding and outside support, and it would soon be provided to him by another researcher, Louis J. West. Jolly West was the head psychiatrist for the CIA's MKUltra mind control program and traveled to the Haight-Ashbury area of San Francisco to continue work on the program, meeting up with David Smith and striking a deal with him. If Smith would allow West to use the clinic as a base of operations, he would receive funding, and in exchange, West would have access to all the test subjects he needed for his LSD-fueled mind control experiments. West took an office in the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, and both researchers, David and Roger Smith, sent patients to his newly created hippie pad on Frederick Street, an old Victorian home that was used as an observation lab disguised as a hippie crash pad that West had staffed with 6 college students disguised as hippies to take notes on what happened there. Roger's role in the experiment was the most important, to keep Manson on the streets and out of prison, and that's exactly what he did. Manson was arrested numerous times between his release in March 1967 and his ultimate arrest after the LaBianca murders in the winter of 1969. Smith never turned him in for violating his parole, and he was never charged with any crime. Roger was there to help him out of trouble every time, allowing the transformation into the violent, mind-controlling hippie that was clearly the focus of the project. Manson and his clan relocated to Los Angeles in 1968, moving into Spahn Ranch, an old movie set owned by George Spahn. The San Francisco Project, the parole officer caseload study, was one of two federally funded studies Roger was a part of. The other was the Amphetamine Research Project, a study on the effects of speed causing violent behavior in street gangs. All files for the ARP project went missing after Manson was arrested for the LaBianca murders, and they've never been found. Both projects were funded through the National Institute for Mental Health, which we now know was used as a front for CIA money during the MKUltra experiments. Smith was so invested in Manson's life, he even cared for his son after he went to prison for the LaBianca murders. The true motive behind the murders will likely never be known. The racist motivations behind the killings suggested by Vince Bugliosi at the trial have no basis in reality and were created to advance his career. Evidence was withheld, witness testimony was fabricated, and he put on a theatrical performance for the court while his co-writer, Kurt Gentry, sat in the courtroom and took notes for his book during the trial. Jolly West claimed in a 1955 letter written to CIA chemist and head of the MKUltra project, Sidney Gottlieb, that he successfully developed a formula to remove memories and insert false ones into a human subject without their knowledge, the main goal of the project. If that's true, then there's likely no ultimate truth to discover, only a manufactured reality that existed for a few fleeting moments in the minds of a handful of young people in 1969. We know that federal prisoners were used as subjects based on the congressional hearings and the existing MKUltra files. We know that Manson spent more than half of his life in federal prisons before being released and placed under the supervision of CIA-funded mind control researchers. We know that Manson himself was able to manipulate people to the point of complete dependence, committing murder, never knowing why, and showing no remorse. It's hard to believe that the actions of a barely literate grifter would perfectly mimic the end goal of the CIA's mind control project by accident. And it's impossible to believe when you know that the men working on the project ensured in the freedom to do it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time for more cults, crimes, and conspiracies.